Union Budget 2026 has been presented, setting the tone for India's economic and fiscal priorities. Beyond the numbers, the real question is, how is this budget going to balance growth, stability, and inclusion? Joining me to share her perspective is Naina Lal Kidwai, past President, FICCI, and Chairperson, Rothschild India Private Limited, founder and Chairperson, India Sanitation Coalition.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. So let's look at the part where we take it between confidence versus caution, continuity versus course correction. If you step back from the fine print now, what is your overall reading of the budget? Does it strike the right balance between growth, stability, and long-term competitiveness? We heard the FM talking about competitiveness, inclusion. Does it strike all the right notes?
I believe it does. I think, the time when we have a big hoopla around budgets must go. And what we're getting here is the direction. So 6 key industries, all which are critical for the country and have great opportunity, were mentioned right up front. We have yet to see what the detailing on each of those would mean. But just the semiconductors, biopharma, the focus on sectors which rare earths, etc., are all very important in terms of the country's growth going forward. I think it's worth also looking at, and a FICCI survey before the budget actually suggested from CEOs that job creation was very important for the country.
Right.
And across different industries, the theme that has been developed is around skilling, training, which in turn obviously focuses therefore on employment, employability, and therefore employment generation and employability come hand in hand. And tourism, which I believe is a very important sector for jobs, got mentioned. There's direct focus on sites and the way government will look at developing those, but also allocations for guides and the whole area of skilling, which must feed into the tourism sector as well. So I think skilling we've seen there, a lot of mention for healthcare delivery, caregivers, etc., again in terms of skilling, and creative industries. There was mention of new labs and abilities therein, astronomy. So you're in different pockets of skill development, national education institutions, etc. I think the desire to skill our people so we can really yield the demographic dividend through, and with direct intervention from the center, are quite noteworthy. In the areas that I work in, through sanitation and water, I think the developments and discussion around developing our tier 2, tier 3 cities and this idea of city economic regions is a very good one to create urban clusters, because our cities get interconnected, whether it's through rail corridors and logistics support, but also through wastewater treatment. And a classic case is what you would see for the Yamuna, that if you do not connect your cities, if one city is not managing its effluent right, the city down the river is clearly going to suffer. So doing it through a cluster approach is going to be very important, and in the development of urban infrastructures. And I think the mention of it, now of course we have to see how it gets implemented, is important. And related to that is the push for municipal bonds. There's support going to be provided from the center of 100 crores for every 1,000 crores plus of municipal bonds that are offered. And I think this will encourage our states to look at municipal bonds for their lesser urban cities as well. So it's not just about our big 5-6 cities, but others as well. So the funding for it and the design therein are quite significant in terms of how they will show the development of India going forward in our tier 2, tier 3 environments as well.
Right. Yeah. You did, comment on the highs probably of the budget. Every budget also has some gaps.
Yeah.
Were there some things that you were looking at, and probably, the FM could have maybe, mentioned those?
I would like to believe and frankly, even the last year has shown that everything doesn't have to be in the budget. The direction setting that we are looking for is in the budget, but there will be many announcements between now and the next budget. I think the markets have clearly reflected their disappointment, so I don't have to explain that. And it comes, I think there was a high expectation that there would be some reprieve around the capital gains tax. Right. Personally, I would have liked to have seen more parity between debt and equity in terms of capital gains tax treatment. Because the development of our bond markets is important. Right. Not that the bond markets have been ignored. I mean, municipal bonds go into that. There is also some mention of aiding the bond markets. But really, a lot of that will have to come to SEBI. But clearly, the tax treatments therein, I think, have been a miss that could have supported bond market development in terms of at least the capital gains treatment therein. But other than that, I think the direction in terms of the macros are great. There is an increase in infra. There was a fear that that might not happen because there is a fear that tax collections may actually be now leveling off or even down. So that focus is important. The fiscal glide path being maintained, right. The GDP debt ratios being maintained. These are highly disciplined approach to the way India is embarking on its growth, and it is a big high. And within that, the spending that's happening is much more on the multiplier effects. And what I mean by that is that you do a credit guarantee scheme, right. You give some money, you give 100 crores for the bond, but you force the municipality to raise the money. Right. So it's pushing down the accountability, but giving the incentive to the state to rise to the challenge. And I think that is structurally good, and it's being done through a challenge mechanism. So the competition amongst states to actually grab that advantage has worked really well. It's something which Niti Aayog started in early days, and I'm glad to see that that is being perpetuated as we go forward. For me also the high is tourism. I feel that there's so much we need to do there. There's mention therein. And also in the whole healthcare, provision of healthcare, push for biopharma, research within the biopharma sectors, these are the highs. And on the misses, I mean, other than tax, I would have liked to hear...
Maybe a little bit more on sustainability?
So sustainability got mentioned. Again, we have to read the fine print that there's something on carbon capture for
that's
key,
the only thing,
for hard to abate industries. So it's there.
Like steel,
Yeah, so it was steel, cement, our big hard to abate industries. So we have to see what provision there would be there. There's been no mention, but we have not gone down to reading the entire print for the support to the Swachh Bharat mission, right. Which numbers last year were clearly there. There's been no mention of any allocation there in her speech, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
Yes, so we'll have to go through the
exactly.
allocations.
And I also know that some of the allocations didn't only come through the budget, they come through the Finance Commission down to the state level, and some of those allocations were indeed not fully spent. So some of the work we do at the India Sanitation Coalition is actually helping with that spending, bringing private sector in to help with that spending as well. Not for private sector's checks, but private sector to aid and assist the Gram Panchayats to actually spend the money. So to the extent that those budgets that weren't used get carried over this year, which I believe is the case, we have some of last year's allocation and hopefully some fresh allocation that we will see in the critical area of wastewater treatment, grey water reuse, some of the actually very successful programs that government embarked on in Swachh Bharat, rural in particular.
Right. One area which also got mentioned was the banking sector, and I would want you to wear your erstwhile bankers hat. The FM talked about constituting a high-powered committee to see the Viksit Bharat high-powered committee to see the banking sector as a whole. How do you think that will pan out?
So it is the fact that it's getting it's going to be strategic directional setting. It's critical. I would so it's very positive. Everything will depend on what they bring out. But I think there is a recognition that we have a banking sector that is strong right now.
Right.
We have really very little issues in terms of NPAs, etc. But we really do need a bigger banking sector to support Viksit Bharat. So what does that take? And the pragmatism which the RBI has recently shown in terms of enabling 2 Japanese banks and an Emirati bank come in at levels of the percentage holdings which are higher than what they have typically permitted,
Yes.
are all indications of a pragmatism that is coming in to attract not just money, because that capital is important, but for every bank that comes, for example, the Japanese presence in India has been really very small, that the banks handhold the Japanese companies in as well. So that catalytic role is also quite important. But let us see what the committee comes back with, because there is a lot that we can look at. And I hope they will also look at the priority sector lending spaces. I mean, at one level, I love the fact that we get those priority sector loans, because I work in some of those areas. But it is an imposition on banks, which then raises the cost of capital, which then makes industry crib rightly about the cost of capital in our country, rendering them less competitive in a global context. So it's a bit of an issue of who should be actually supporting the development initiatives in the country, and is it fair to push this onto the banks? And the banks, it's not just public sector, it's uniform,
across,
private and public.
So I think priority sector lending, the cost of credit, one of the key sectors which really get hassled, or which really has to tackle all of this is the MSME sector.
Correct.
And we've heard the FM talk about easing liquidity for them. We've heard about the announcements around TREDS.
Right.
How do you take all the announcements that the FM had around MSMEs? How important were those?
I think every step, the MSME is not forgotten, that is clear. And there's a lot in the budget there, not just the direct steps and the provision of equity fund for SMEs, etc. It's all there. But for every bit of manufacturing that benefits, so let's talk of the 6 key sectors, there is an MSME that is a supplier to that big company. So electronics is a case in point. It was one of the, and continues to be a key focus for our country, and with some success. So yes, and Apple is now exporting a large number of iPhones, but to provide the inputs for Apple, you have a huge supply chain, and replacing the imported supply chain with domestic manufacture can fall squarely into the MSME's court. So MSMEs as suppliers to OEMs will be the whole manufacturing sector focus that this budget has provided, will benefit MSMEs across the board. And I think other than the direct financial and liquidity support that has been mentioned in the budget. And the other area that MSMEs, in fact all industry benefits, but MSMEs being such a core part of it will benefit, is everything to do with skilling. So when you talk of biopharma and skilling in the health universe, then any companies that are indeed suppliers therein use those skills. The training we provide, the employability provision that we give to our people, become a very important aspect of how can I run my business as an MSME. And if I can avail of these skills, then it makes me more competitive and able to provide services. So I think that whole ecosystem for manufacturing, through skilling, through cost of capital, frankly, all the factors of production, land costs are an issue. Therein, there's this approach of clustering, opening up SEZs for domestic release of product, even though it's announced as a one-time initiative. But it's been a big ask from industry. I've set up a plant, only 60% is getting used for export. Why can I not do 100% and that 40% be used for the domestic market? Has been an ask, and that has been in fact acknowledged and provided for in this budget. So that helps all industry in terms of capacity utilization.
Right. One last quick question to you would be, if you had to flag one issue that businesses and policymakers should watch out for in the next 1 year before we get to that next budget,
Yeah.
what would that be?
I think the whole issue of compliances, where there's recognition in this budget that at the one end there are punitive penalties, including imprisonment, for what don't look like such major offences and are not necessarily offences that are done intentionally, because we have very complex interpretations of some of these rules. So there's been a lot of work that has happened, but more work that needs to continue. And again, the FICCI survey from CEOs mentioned, 80% of those CEOs said that there needed to be much better streamlining of the customer side of it. Now, if we are looking to be an exporting nation, we better sort that out. And again, on dispute resolution, on clarity of tax, these are things which are ongoing. And we do need to see the ease of doing business, particularly from tax compliance, tax interpretation, dispute resolution, etc., continuing to improve, both through, I think, the use of intelligent AI, not just being applied in a superficial way. Also, and by intelligent AI, I also mean that if you keep raising the same issues across the board for taxpayers, then it must indicate that there's lack of clarity in that sense. So AI should point to what isn't working.
Right.
Or if the same tax officer loses every case that goes up for litigation, there's an indication that maybe there's something that needs to be done there. So let's use this for the efficiency therein. And I think this will be a big ask and continue to be an ask in terms of tax compliances and how they get implemented over the year and across the board. And the good news is this budget recognizes it. It's got a number of important measures announced. And I think that will have to continue to be something which we will see, frankly, over the years as we go forward.
Perfect. I think that's a good place to end this conversation. Thank you so much for talking to us, Ms. Kidwai.
Thank you. Thanks.